Elena's voice was barely a whisper when she said it. "Ma'am, don't go home. Check the cameras right now." 2 hours earlier, I'd watched my father and my stepmother walk through airport security. Their flight was supposed to be taking them across the Atlantic. So why was Victoria's black SUV suddenly sitting in our driveway? I pulled over at a gas station, opened the security feed, and watched her walk straight into my father's private study with a man I'd never seen before. Then they moved a painting. Behind it was a safe I didn't even know existed. The man opened it. Victoria pulled out an envelope with my name on it, read the letter inside, and went completely still. Then she said 4 words that changed everything. "She can't know about this." She was right. I couldn't know. Not yet. For 10 years, I had a simple explanation for Victoria. After my mother died, my father needed someone who could keep life organized, and Victoria stepped into that role. She handled the bills, insurance, paperwork, and eventually most of my father's medical appointments. From the outside, she looked dependable. I believed that. I was an army officer, and my career had kept me away from home for long stretches. I'd spent 12 years serving, including 3 deployments, and I had become used to trusting the people who were supposed to have things under control. My father trusted Victoria. So I did too. That was why Elena's phone call hit me so hard. She had worked in my father's house long enough to know when something was wrong. She didn't usually call me about small things. When she whispered, "Ma'am, don't come home. Check the cameras right now," I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. 2 hours earlier, I had watched my father and Victoria leave for the airport. The timeline was simple, until Victoria's SUV appeared in our driveway. I pulled over and opened the security app. There she was. Victoria walked into the house with a man I didn't recognize. They didn't hesitate. They went straight toward my father's private study. That room had always been different from the rest of the house. My father kept his most important paperwork there, and everyone understood that you didn't enter without permission. Not even Elena. I watched Victoria glance toward the camera before walking inside. That tiny movement bothered me more than anything else. She knew the cameras were there, and she was checking whether anyone was watching. I called Elena. She told me Victoria had been asking questions for months. Where did my father keep important papers? Did he still use the same insurance company? Were there old boxes from before the marriage? At the time, none of those questions had seemed dangerous. Now they did. I turned back to the camera. Victoria walked toward a painting on the wall. Then she lifted it. Behind it was a safe. I'd lived in that house for 33 years. I had never known it was there. The man beside her crouched down and worked on the lock while Victoria watched the hallway. Then the safe opened. There was a folder, a small wooden box, and an envelope. The envelope had my name written across it. I felt something inside me change. Until that moment, I had been trying to explain what I was seeing. Maybe Victoria had forgotten something. Maybe my father had sent her back. Maybe the man was a lawyer. Then Victoria opened my envelope. She read the single page inside. Her face changed. She folded the letter, slipped it into her jacket, looked toward the door, and said quietly, "She can't know about this." I replayed the recording twice. Not because I hadn't heard her, because I wanted to be wrong. I wasn't. Whatever was inside that envelope concerned me. Victoria knew it concerned me, and she had decided I wasn't supposed to know. I could have driven straight home. I could have walked through that door and demanded an explanation. But I had learned something during my years in the army. When something doesn't make sense, you don't make the situation worse by acting on the first explanation that enters your head. You gather information. So I called my father's attorney, Reyes. His office was closed, so I left a message. Then I started looking through the records I had access to. Old emails, documents, anything connected to my mother's estate. My mother had died 10 years earlier, shortly before my father married Victoria. Before she died, she had owned an investment account and part of a vacation property on the Eastern Shore. The beneficiary records showed my name, not Victoria's. That was when the pieces began fitting together. The hidden safe, the questions about paperwork, The envelope with my name. Victoria returning to the house after supposedly leaving with my father. I still didn't know exactly what she wanted, but I knew she wasn't looking for something she'd forgotten. She was looking for something she believed she needed to control. Then Elena called again. She told me something she'd remembered. A week before my father's wedding, he had given her a small wooden box. He had told her, if anything ever happens to me, make sure Caroline gets this. Elena had kept it safe. Until one day, it disappeared. She had never asked Victoria about it. She had been too afraid. I understood why. Victoria had spent years making herself indispensable. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to threaten anyone. People simply learned to be careful around her. I didn't go home that night. I waited for Reyes's office to open the next morning. Because before I accused my stepmother of anything, I wanted to know exactly what she had been trying to take. And whether the paperwork she was counting on could actually protect her. Reyes opened his office early the next morning. I was already waiting outside. I told him everything. The camera footage. Victoria returning to the house. The hidden safe. The envelope. And the words I'd heard her say. She can't know about this. Reyes listened without interrupting. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Is there a trust in my name connected to my mother's estate? He paused, then nodded. Yes. My stomach tightened. He explained that my father had established the trust years ago. It was designed to protect assets connected to my mother's estate and ensure they eventually passed to me. Then he pulled up another document. An amendment. It had been filed only a few months earlier. According to the document, Victoria would receive control over a significant share of those assets after my father's death. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. Victoria had been inside the safe. She had found my letter. She'd been asking questions about my father's paperwork. And now I was looking at a document. That seemed to give her exactly what she'd been trying to secure. It felt like the answer. Almost too neatly. Then Reyes pulled up another record. A clinic appointment. 2 states away. The date matched the day the amendment was supposedly signed. I stared at the screen. My father was there? According to this record, yes. I checked the date again. That was the same day Victoria had described to me as a quiet day. When my father stayed home resting. Suddenly, the document that had looked like Victoria's greatest advantage became the first thing I needed to understand. I asked Reyes whether the signature was actually my father's. He told me it appeared to be. But that wasn't the only question. The circumstances mattered. Then my father called. He finally admitted something he'd kept from me. His flight had never left. He had been sitting at the airport when he decided not to board. He had been thinking about the safe code he'd changed months earlier. He had started wondering what Victoria might do if the house were empty. So he stayed behind. Not because he'd planned some elaborate trap. Because he was afraid. He hoped he was wrong. I met him at the hotel that afternoon. He looked older than he had that morning. He told me Victoria had gradually become more involved in his medical appointments. She had been arranging paperwork and handling details while he was tired and recovering. Then I asked about the amendment. Do you remember signing it? He looked down. I remember signing papers. Did you understand what you were signing? He shook his head. I was groggy after a procedure. Victoria told me it was routine. That was when I understood the difference between suspicion and proof. I couldn't accuse Victoria based on a feeling. Neither could my father. So we stopped trying to guess what she had intended. We focused on what we could prove. We gathered the security footage, the audio, the trust documents, the clinic records, the timeline, my father's account. Everything went into one file. No accusations. No threats. No confrontation. Just facts. And that was when the balance changed. Victoria had spent years believing that control came from knowing more than everyone else. She knew where the documents were. She knew what my father had signed. She knew what she wanted. She believed that was enough. But she'd overlooked something. A document isn't powerful simply because someone believes it is. It has to survive scrutiny. We scheduled a meeting at Reyes's office. Neutral ground. No shouting. No scene. Just Victoria, my father, Reyes, and me. And a table full of evidence. Victoria arrived 12 minutes late. She walked in carrying a leather folder. She looked exactly like the woman I'd known for 10 years. Calm. Prepared. Certain she was in control. She sat down and placed the folder on the table. I assume this is about the trust, she said. Nobody answered. Reyes opened a file. We're reviewing several documents. Victoria smiled slightly. Which documents? The trust amendment dated June 14th. Her expression barely changed. That document is valid. Reyes asked, are you certain? Yes. Richard signed it. I watched him sign it. My father looked at the table. Victoria continued. He understood exactly what he was signing. I waited. That was the first statement she made that could actually be tested. Reyes turned on the monitor. The first video appeared. It showed Victoria entering my father's house. She walked into the study, removed the painting, opened the hidden safe. Victoria stared at the screen, then at me. What is this? Reyes played the next portion. Victoria standing beside the safe, the envelope in her hand. My name clearly visible. Then her own voice filled the room. She can't know about this. The recording stopped. Silence filled the office. Victoria looked at Elena. You recorded me? Elena shook her head. The cameras did. Victoria turned back toward Reyes. You can't seriously use that to suggest I did something wrong. Reyes remained calm. We're not suggesting anything. We're establishing a timeline. He placed the clinic record beside the trust amendment. The amendment says Richard signed this document on June 14th. Victoria nodded. Correct. Richard was at a medical clinic in another state that day. Her eyes narrowed. He traveled afterward. Reyes placed the discharge record on the table. Then the appointment record. Then the transportation record. The timeline was becoming impossible to ignore. My father had been at the clinic. He'd undergone a procedure. He had been discharged later that afternoon. He had not been sitting at home calmly reviewing estate documents. Victoria looked at him. You remember signing it? My father nodded slowly. I remember signing papers. Exactly. I don't remember understanding that amendment. Victoria's expression changed. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsettled. Reyes leaned back. That's the issue. Victoria shook her head. No. The issue is that he signed it. Not necessarily. Her eyes snapped toward him. What does that mean? It means we're examining whether the amendment was properly executed and filed. She stared at him. You already filed it. Reyes answered calmly. Someone submitted a document. Victoria frowned. That's the same thing. No. He opened another file. This is the filing history. He turned the monitor toward her. The amendment had not been properly recorded in the manner required for the trust. The document existed. But existence wasn't the same as legal effectiveness. Victoria stared at the screen. I could almost see the calculation changing inside her head. She had believed the signature was the finish line. It wasn't. It was the beginning of scrutiny. She looked at me. You planned this. I shook my head. No. You've been trying to take this from me. No. Then why did you bring all this here? I looked at the folder sitting in front of her. Because you told me you had nothing to hide. She didn't answer. I continued. You were right. Victoria looked confused. You didn't hide everything. Her eyes narrowed. You left evidence everywhere. The room went completely quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The footage had already spoken. The audio had already spoken. The medical records had already spoken. And now the legal review is speaking too. Reyes turned toward Victoria. Richard's access to the accounts connected to the trust will be secured. The amendment will undergo formal review. Until that process is complete, you will not have authority over those assets. Victoria's face went pale. You can't do that. I can advise my client. She looked at my father. Richard. He didn't answer. She tried again. Richard, you know I handled everything. He looked at her for a long time. I know. Then you know why I did what I did. He shook his head. No. That one word seemed to hit harder than anything else. For 10 years, Victoria had been the person everyone depended on. Now nobody in that room was depending on her. Reyes closed the file. The amendment you're relying on was not properly executed or filed. Your access will be removed while the documents are reviewed. Victoria looked down at her hands. The leather folder was still sitting in front of her. She had brought it into the room believing it would protect her. Now it looked like nothing more than a prop. She finally looked at me. "Why didn't you confront me?" I answered honestly. "Because I didn't know the whole story. And now? Now I don't need to." She looked toward my father. He was already signing the documents Reyes had prepared. Documents securing the accounts. Documents restricting unauthorized access. Documents beginning the process of rebuilding the estate plan. Victoria stood. Nobody stopped her. She picked up the leather folder, then paused at the door. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. Not angry. Not powerful. Just uncertain. She had spent years believing that control came from keeping everyone else uninformed. But the moment the information became documented, her control disappeared. She left without another word. The door closed behind her. And nobody celebrated. Because this wasn't a victory built on humiliation. It was a correction. A boundary. A record of what had actually happened. My father looked at me. "I'm sorry." I knew what he meant. Not just for Victoria. For the years he had kept me outside the truth. Because he thought protecting me meant keeping me uninformed. I nodded. "I know." A few days later, Victoria moved out. There was no public confrontation. No family spectacle. She packed her belongings and left. The documents continued through formal review. My father's accounts were secured. And he began rebuilding his estate plan himself. This time, he read everything. He asked questions. And whenever something wasn't clear, he stopped. That change mattered more to me than anything that happened to Victoria. Because I had spent years believing my father was simply unaware. Now I understood that he had been afraid too. Fear had made him delay. And it had allowed Victoria to become the person standing between us. Eventually, my father asked me to come back to the house. I hesitated. That house felt different now. The hallway where I'd watched the security footage. The study. The painting hiding the safe. The room where I'd spent years believing everything was exactly what it appeared to be. But eventually I went. My father was waiting in the kitchen. He looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. He had spent years trying to protect the family by keeping difficult things quiet. Now he understood that silence hadn't protected us. It had only delayed the truth. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For not telling you sooner." I looked at him. "You were trying to protect me." He nodded. But I needed the truth more than I needed protection. His eyes dropped. "I know." Then he handed me the wooden box. The same box Elena had told me about. The one my father had once told her to protect for me. My hands shook when I opened it. Inside was a letter from my mother. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the trust. It wasn't even about Victoria. It was about me. My mother had written that independence wasn't the same thing as isolation. That asking questions wasn't disrespect. That trusting someone didn't mean ignoring evidence. And that loving family didn't mean surrendering your ability to recognize when something was wrong. I read the letter twice. Then I looked at my father. He was crying quietly. So was I. For weeks, I'd thought the most important thing I'd uncovered was Victoria's secret. It wasn't. The real discovery was how easily fear, silence, and misplaced trust could change a family. Victoria had wanted control. She had believed information gave her power. And for a while, it had. But once the truth was documented, that power disappeared. I never had to destroy her. I never had to threaten her. I never had to become like her. I only had to stop protecting a secret I didn't understand. For a long time, I thought justice meant making someone face the same pain they had caused. I don't believe that anymore. Victoria didn't need to be humiliated. She didn't need to be destroyed. She simply needed to lose the control she had never been entitled to have. The night Elena warned me not to come home, I thought she was warning me about something dangerous. She was actually warning me about something more important. A secret. Because once a secret involves your name, your family, and your future, staying uninformed isn't protection. It's vulnerability. So if there's one thing I took from that night, it's this. When someone tells you that you don't need to know something that directly affects your life, don't panic. Don't explode. Don't guess. Ask questions. Keep records. Verify the facts. Because sometimes the person trying hardest to control the story is the person most afraid of what the evidence will reveal. And sometimes the strongest response isn't revenge. It's simply refusing to let anyone else control the truth. Because once the truth is documented, it doesn't belong to the person who tried to hide it anymore. It belongs to the record. And sometimes that's all the justice you need.